Dear class, welcome to the final report. We're going to start on the first part of the final report this week, which is the Community Agencies Work Plan. If you've looked at the wiki or you've read the lecture, then you know I've already written the introduction for you. And I dare say I am probably the first professor who's ever written the introduction to any of your papers, but here you go. So, how does it read? Based upon the preceding three reports, our task force puts forth the following recommendations. The recommendations address the two foci of our efforts, the community and the state agency. The state agency cannot be held solely accountable for the welfare of children living in our communities. That responsibility must be jointly shared with those communities and the agencies in those communities. Therefore, recommendations will be made for the community agencies and separate recommendations will follow for the state agency. Where collaborative efforts might intersect, each sector will specifically define their contributions to those efforts. So the next few weeks, what is that going to look like? Well, we'll do the community agency's work plan first. Then we'll do the state agency work plan. And then we will do the conclusion. And I'll tell you now that the conclusion is going to happen entirely on Blackboard in the discussion forums. Conversely, I am not expecting a lot of discussion forum work over the next couple of weeks. You all are very busy as the semester is starting to wind down, and I feel like a better use of your time would be focusing on these reports and doing what it takes to produce the reports. I did go ahead and create a discussion forum for the final report, and I went ahead and put in a thread simply for general questions, and you're most welcome to post general questions there about the final report. I will be checking those threads every day. If I were you, I would also check those threads every day to see if your peers are posting questions, because they may have some of the same questions that you have. So not only have I written your introduction for you, but I've also provided the outline for your report. And I just don't know how much better it can get. Well, I guess I could write your report for you, but I'm going to draw the line there. And here's just part of the outline that deals with the community agency's work plan. It is, again, addressing each of the issues, and you are to address these issues from the perspective of your department. Now, some of you may be saying, well, how can I tell a mental health agency what to do? And if you want to think about it a little bit more broadly, we could easily make the assumption that you have been working with the mental health agency over these past few weeks, and that you have decided to partner with them, and they may have their own task force. So be thinking about how perhaps your counterpart in that agency might articulate these recommendations, or somebody from the domestic violence shelter. How might they articulate what the recommendations need to be? Or your task force together may have come up with these recommendations and say, you know, the substance abuse program in our community feels like they really need to take this initiative. And then for rural child welfare, you need to assume that there is an interagency group already in your community dealing with these issues. And quite frankly, it may not be in every, necessarily in every city or town in a particular county, but if you look in any county area, there's most likely some type of interagency group across every county in Missouri. And they may not be in the Human Services Agency. It could be in the health department. It could be could be through the school, but there's most likely some entity, even in our small rural communities, that has an interagency work group dealing with these things. And you simply need to come up with 3 recommendations for each of these entities in the community. Now, you can remove that text, recommendation 1, recommendation 2, or you can just leave the number 1, 2, and 3. But you need to come up with at least, you just need to come up with 3 recommendations for each group. These recommendations need to be specific. So I went to the definition, and just in case we're confused about what that means, it needs to be clearly defined or identified. It needs to be particular. It needs to be fixed, set, determined. It needs to be distinct, and it needs to be definite. You need to mention volunteer and other civic groups in your community. And many of you have already done this. This will not be news for any group. You've already identified these groups. You need to then articulate them here in the report. You can mention the state agency, but you need to contextualize your efforts for the community agency work plan in terms of what they will initiate in the community. And these recommendations must come from childwelfare.gov. And getting back to the specific thing, and yes, I did say specific. You just can't say things like the agencies need to work together or they need to apply for funding. If you go to the reports at childwelfare.gov, there will be many specific projects that have been done. And I fully expect you to cite these projects. And when you do, just put in the last name of the author and the year, and then go ahead and give the title of the report below your section of the report. So we need to say things like working together to do, and then X, Y, and Z, or ABC, and then cite the source. Apply for funding from, this government program to do, and then cite the specific things that you would do. Collaborate with, and you can easily see how you would collaborate. If you're doing mental health, you would collaborate with the substance abuse providers in order to, but cite the specific mental health outcomes you would want to achieve, and then cite the source. And I must mention that Taylor, Gavin, and Kipton are my nephews, but my sister-in-law has a wonderful way with names, and they just sound like authors to me. Moving along. In thinking about this report, it really is the culmination of a lot of work. You started this in the first report, where you did a lot of analysis, and in the second report, analysis with the issues. You went through a lot of the reports at childwelfare.gov. You went through your discussion forums and your discussion threads to tease apart the ideas that you were getting from these reports. And then we got to the third report, and you started bringing these things together in your synthesis. You were looking at similarities and trends in the other reports, and you brought this all together, and you noted that these issues and these problems were related to child welfare in our community are very interrelated. It's just not to have an organizational response. You simply can't have one agency do this or one agency do that. It's very much an interdependent, integrated process. So even though I've provided an introduction, even though I've provided an outline, I have no doubt that many of you will rightly have questions. So there's a draft deadline coming up April 20th. and I very much encourage you to do so. If you're in doubt about anything, submit a draft. If you already know what you're doing, I would go ahead and submit a draft. If you don't have a clue, submit a draft. And in a word, I would just go ahead and submit a draft. When you do submit a draft, submit it directly to the wiki for your section, and simply know when you do so. And why post it to the wiki? Why not just email it to me? Well, I still want you to benefit from the collaborative efforts of each other. And one of you may have some really good ideas for working with one issue in the community that could be helpful to get somebody else's thinking kind of unstuck if they can't figure out where they want to go with something. So still, please submit all your drafts to the wiki. And even though it's individual effort and individual grade, I believe you're very much benefiting from the work that everybody else is doing. So if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.